A question I get asked all the time is how to shadow anatomy. I'm going to show you how to light some simple shapes, and then we'll transfer what we've learned onto some more complex anatomy. I'm David Finch, and I've been drawing comics for Marvel and DC for over 25 years. Thanks for checking out my channel, and if you like what you see, please hit like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon. Alright, we're going to start. Instead of drawing a complete figure with anatomy and all the muscles drawn in and all the detail that you're used to seeing, we're just going to go ahead and draw a very, very simple representation of a figure. And the idea of this is to get across lighting in its most simple form. It's very easy to light a tube. You can see where the light's coming from. I've drawn a little arrow, and that's my directional light. And then on the other side of my objects, the sides that are away from the light, I'm drawing a shadow. It's pretty standard, and when you have such simple shapes, it's really easy to see that you obviously don't put any shadows all the way up towards your light source on the other side of that curved object. And so now I'm going to cast a shadow onto the body from the arm, and again, this is coming from the light. And so this, instead of being a core shadow, which is what is on the arm, this is actually a cast shadow, and so it's casting onto the object below it. And that, in essence, is all there is really to lighting. The rest is very much detail. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the same thing again, and this time I'm going to go ahead and detail it out much more like an actual figure drawing with some anatomy, some muscles, and just, you know, a cool arm. I like to start always with a cartoon where I just rough in my anatomical shapes. I get all the muscles kind of delineated and everything sorted out so I know where I'm going with it, and then I can go on and tighten it up. So I'm just getting this part finished up, and I'm gonna hit it with the eraser once this is done, just to lighten it up, and then we'll be able to get more of a finished drawing out of it. No line weights or lighting yet, but this is what we're gonna ultimately hang all of our lighting on. All right, so just lightening it up here. This way I can see what I'm drawing, but it's not going to interfere ultimately with the final picture. And I get asked actually quite a bit how I'm able to get finished drawings that are so clean on the page without all the underdrawing and the scribbling. And I know there are some artists that like to draw on a separate piece of paper, and then they'll actually transfer it with a light box, which is a great method, and you get a very clean drawing that way. For me, that's a level of patience that I just don't have. I learned this actually from Mark Silvestri, who was a great teacher. This is the way that he would draw, and it's just a very direct method. It's much quicker. And I find when I draw things more than once, I tend to lose a lot of my spontaneity. I think probably a good portion of that is just losing interest in what I'm doing. I can be a pretty lazy artist, so the less work that I have to do to get the final result, that's really what I'm looking for. So at this point, I've got everything basically drawn in, all my detail in. I'm just adjusting the elbow a little bit, and now I'm going to draw in my light source. And the same way that I did on the simple drawing, now I'm just going in the backside of that tube form. It's overall a tube. Now it's got muscles that actually have dimension drawn on top of that tube, and so I need to bear that in mind and actually draw the shadowing of all those muscles. But what's most important is that as I go further around the curve, things get darker and the shadow gets thicker. The shadow gets thicker, and I make sure to not draw any really, really heavy shadow toward the top of the curve, because it can really flatten out your picture. This is a mistake I see all the time in drawing, and that's having the light source coming from a single direction, and it's correct, but because the lighting isn't really rounding and it isn't getting darker toward the backside of a curve and then thinner and lighter as it rounds, it ends up looking just very odd and wrong. And you can see that it's wrong when you look at it, but it can be a very difficult thing to diagnose, because you are really following the rules as you know them when you're drawing in your lighting. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cast my shadow from the arm the same way I did in the simple drawing. And basically what I have is just a more complex version of what I drew before. I'm drawing interconnecting muscles and then shadowing those as individual shapes, but I'm really trying to make sure to absolutely bear in mind that I'm drawing an overall picture and it has to work together. Something I really like to do is erase out and draw in veins. I just like that sort of detail, and I find it can just add a good amount of dimension. I'm going to put a little vein just on the top of the arm there. All right, so moving on, we're going to draw a second drawing here. Now I have to admit, as I was recording this, I made the mistake of not hitting record when I started drawing my simple shape, but hopefully you can see that it's just a very, very simplified chest and arm shape. So it's pretty straightforward. The top of the stomach curves under, and so it's away from the light, so it's darkened. Obviously the left side of the body, our left looking at the body, is dark. The light's coming from the other side. So I'm just mimicking that again on the other side, lightening it up so I get something nice and clean, and I'm going to go ahead and draw in my more complete drawing on top of it. And I'm roughing in my anatomy here. I have to admit, when I started, I would draw in every muscle shape completely, so everything was fully realized, and then I would go on to this stage afterwards. But as I've been doing this more, I've actually found that the profile of the body and the arm and different anatomical parts is the most important part, and the thing that really gives it its life and its shape. So I concentrate more on that, and then draw the individual muscles inside it. And it's an experience thing. The more you do it, the more you know where the muscles go, and you really don't need to overthink them too much when you're drawing them in. So I'm just getting this finished out. I want to try to get as much shape in there as I can, just to give me something to work on when I put in the lighting. This is really kind of my blueprint. So now I'm going to draw in my light source again. And I'm just going to start the same way that I did with the arm. This side of the chest here is pointing away from the light. I'm actually drawing a cast shadow now from that shape onto the side of the body, the lat. That's what it is. And now this is where the stomach muscles curve down away from the light. So I'm drawing that in. Some of my little rib detail, and you can see as I get closer to the light, I'm actually drawing much smaller shadow shapes and making sure to keep it much lighter. And then as I get away from the light on the side of the arm, I'm going darker and thicker. So I'm just continuing down the stomach and casting a shadow across the side of the body there. And I'm just delineating each individual muscle as I go. And as long as you think of all the muscles as part of a whole, everything holds together much, much better. I'm going to get in side of the arm, much darker toward the outside, away from the light, and then lighter toward the light. Now, as I'm drawing the bicep, I feel like I've got that a little dark, but I'm correcting it by drawing in a shadow along the side of the bicep away from the light again, and it kind of brought it back together. And this is where making sure that all of your anatomy works together again is so incredibly important, and not just drawing each muscle as an individual piece. I drew in a shadow for the side of the head, and underneath the chin, it obscures the light quite a bit, so I've drawn a cast shadow across the upper part of the shoulder toward the back. And now I'm just going in and just refining a few details, and that is just about it. And so as a final exercise, I wanted to just draw some muscle shapes. And you can see that they're just elongated football shapes that interconnect. And so I can draw shadowing on the left-hand side of them, again, away from the light. I'm keeping all my lighting consistent here. And then making sure that as I go further from the light, they actually get thicker. And I think this circle example might actually be an even better example of the concept that I'm talking about. So I'm going to draw in my core shadow away from the light. And now I'm going to draw a ridge, and this is going to be quite a bit thinner. And then I'm going to draw another ridge in much closer to the light. And you can see how much thinner they get as they go further and further from the light. And that makes it look like a cohesive object that's lit as a whole, as opposed to just individual shapes that are mashed together. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.